What happens when four mothers of different races and life experiences drop the mask to discuss our roles in reshaping the race narrative going forward? Listen in. This is Motherhood Unmasked, the podcast for real talk about the challenges moms face. I'm your host, Vanessa Harris. But Mama, you're the kind of hero who doesn't need to hide behind a mask. I'm looking forward to connecting with you today. Welcome to episode 9. If you've been following this podcast, you've already noticed this one is much longer than the other episodes, and with good reason. The horrific death of George Floyd just 2 weeks ago via the knee of a white police officer is a graphic reminder of what happens when we cover our ears, close our eyes tight, and wish things away. That approach doesn't work for an infected wound, and it certainly hasn't for this country's raging infection called systematic racism. And as a Black woman with a Black husband and 2 teenage sons, who also recognizes that a mother's influence impacts generations, I felt compelled to create a space for mothers to join me in sharing how they're using their influence to shape their children's views of people who don't look like them. I asked a few friends of mine to do just that. Some declined because of fear of not having done enough and being judged for it. The fear of public opinion is the bane of our current existence. It's also the reason this hate has festered in our nation for hundreds of years. So, at the risk of being judged by other moms of every hue and perspective, 3 friends of mine, 2 white, 1 Black, sent me their recorded answers to the same question. And I'm sharing their answers with you in this episode. Kirsten lives in the suburbs of Houston, as do I. She's an author, podcaster, and mother of 5. And she's starting off the conversation.
I'm Kirsten, and Vanessa has asked me to answer the question, what role am I playing in reshaping the race narrative of this nation going forward? And this week, I feel like a lot of time and attention has gone into me thinking about what this means for my platform as a podcaster, an author, and someone in the online space. But perhaps the most important platform, not to discount the small corner of the internet I have, but the most important platform may be my home and the 5 little people in it, and how my husband and I together are really shaping what they think and how they feel and the things that they know, the information that they have. And I think my husband and I have actually had a lot of talks about this together, and I'm thankful that he is a partner in this. He had a really good conversation with one of his best friends who's Black, who had not really shared some of the things that he'd been through, and they had a really honest conversation that I think opened his eyes. And so we've been having a lot of conversations at home, and the 3 things I'm really thinking about, first there's like the awareness of all of this. And I think both of us have been somewhat aware, but are becoming increasingly more aware, not just of, the sort of like slight racism that, we felt like we understood and knew was there, but to the more systemic and systematic racism that has existed and that we have benefited from and been a part of. And that, is something that's an important part. And moving from awareness, there comes education. And that's something that's important for us, and then is important for our kids as well. And the last thing is action. What are we doing? Like, aware, we know things now. What are we doing about it? And this goes for us and our children. Like, what are my husband and I doing? How am I, as a white woman, how am I not just being a mouth, not just being someone who's making a Facebook post, but actually making a difference in the outside world? How am I modeling that in front of my kids, and how am I talking to them? And so I think that that same sort of like cycle of 3 needs to happen with our children as well. Bringing awareness to them, because even though, I watch, they actually play with more people of color than probably I did when I was younger because of, where we live or other things. And they don't notice as much as I think even I did. Like, I feel like I can see the difference. But that's not enough. And so for us, it's bringing awareness to them. And I had a talk with my oldest son, who's 12, about white privilege this week. And it was interesting because he got it. It wasn't a surprise to him, but he was like, oh yeah, we did learn about slavery, but I hadn't thought about that. That makes complete sense, that the privilege that we have. So bringing awareness to them in education, we've been reading, we've been watching, we've been ordering books to educate ourselves. And how do we speak to our children about this? And what's hard, and this is not I really don't want this to be a woe is me, but it is hard coming from the outside and wanting to know what can we best do to support people of color in the Black community, because I feel like there are a lot of mixed messages out there, because it's a diverse community. It's not that everybody's totally unified. And so there are some people who are telling me that you need to speak, and some that are saying you should be silent, and some that are saying silence is complicit. And so it is really hard, and we're grappling with, what do people want? How can I best serve? What's actually service, not just speaking, again, making some kind of a post that, is just making it look like I'm a partner. So we are listening and trying to figure that out. And we're being really honest with our kids. And I think that that's something that's really important. And we're being honest about ugly stuff too. And all of this is really ugly. It's ugly what's happening in our nation. And it's not just one of those things that we can point outward and say it's ugly there, but we have to say what's in our lives and our hearts is also ugly, and having to deal with that and be honest about it. So I hope that there is some impact from what we're doing. And really, it's about bringing this awareness to our kids, educating them, and helping them to not just know that racism exists, but to actually know and be aware and take anti-racist actions, just the same way my husband and I hope to do that and model that in front of them.
I love how Kirsten mentioned her home as the most important platform she has in a culture where we're encouraged to pay more attention to our appearance on social media than the substance of what's shared at home. But I'd like to speak to a point Kirsten made that I've often heard in my circles and on social media. She mentioned grappling with how to help in a way that's welcomed by the Black community, because the truth is, like any people group, we're not uniform in thought any more than we are skin tone. So I think sincerity is where we should put the focus, because when you move beyond talk and take action based on what's on your heart to do, it goes a long way in demonstrating your desire for positive change. And because the Black experience is not your experience, it's wise to stay open, I think, to redirection should you misstep along the way. Because just like a car goes nowhere while it's parked, we won't make progress in dismantling a system of inherent bias if you stay silent in public or at your dinner table. It takes a willingness like Kirsten's to do what's right without guarantees. Next, we'll hear from Makia, a mother of 3 in D.C. who is also an associate pastor of the multiracial, multicultural church my family and I were members of prior to moving to Texas.
What role as a mother am I playing in reshaping the race narrative of this nation moving forward? The first aspect of the role would be my personhood, myself, that I myself have an awareness or understanding of what I'm feeling and what is going on inside of my head and inside of my heart. And I get to journey through that by reading a diverse grouping of books, by engaging with various diverse thought leaders, by engaging in different groups and sitting at different tables where conversation and dialogue is being held on many avenues of things that affect people in this world. And so that is very important for me on the personal level. I am aware and I understand that I am my children's first example. They are looking to me first for everything. So I must exemplify what it is I desire to see in the world. I'm their first example of love. I'm their first example of patience. I'm their first example of grace and of mercy. And that means that within myself, I need to be shoring up what that is. How am I practicing these virtues and these skills? Because they're watching me. And I don't want to just be about the talk. I want my life to show that. Now, the second part of what I think I'm doing to change the narrative is I am engaging my children. I talk to them about some of the things that I learn. I talk to them about the things that are going on in the world. And I want them to be confident and learned and understanding what is happening. And I want them to be able to create and have their own critical thought that they're able to articulate. And so we spend a lot of time together talking about many things, not only issues of race, though that's the one on the table right now, about politics. We talk about a lot, and we especially talk about God. We talk about how he sees people. We discuss what he expects from us, what he wants us to do with our hurt and our disappointment, and how we engage with people who don't think like us or don't look like us. So I just believe the dialogue with our children is very important. I know what they are understanding because they are talking to me about it. If there's something that is coming out of them that they have questions about, I want to help answer it. And if I don't know the answer, I tell them we're going to work through this together. And I love it. I love that this is the next generation of humans that will help us be a better place. They'll help us be a better America. And I want them to be equipped and prepared to do so. My desire is that they are healthy components of what is happening in this society, loving each other and people that are not like them, and being bridge and change makers here in the United States of America in their homes. And it starts with me. It starts with us around our tables, engaging, talking, and praying.
I wonder if you agree with Akia as I do when she says our children look to us first. You are your child's first and best teacher, but you can't teach what you don't know. So she's intentionally reading books and exposing herself to circles outside of her box to engage the thoughts of people who don't look or think like her, which is actually the norm for Black and brown people. But to end the systemic oppression of people of color, white people will have to be willing to be uncomfortable, to get in spaces with people who don't look like you and hear their story without getting defensive. And that's hard work, something my next guest speaks to. Charlie is a homeschooling mom of 2 in Maryland who I met when I homeschooled and was looking for a co-op for my kids and I to be a part of. She spearheaded that co-op held at the same church I mentioned earlier.
Hi, Vanessa. Thanks for asking this big question here. So, as a white mom with 2 young men in my family, how do I move forward, and what do we do to change this narrative, this conversation, this reality in our families? And I'm touched by the Lord to pay attention to 3 things: education, rumination, and advocacy. Number 1, I feel very compelled that it is our job to educate our children in the truth, and the truth of the scripture, as well as the truth of men and what has actually happened, not just what makes us comfortable, and teaching them to be able to connect those dots and see how what is done by previous generations affects us today and how we can move forward in changing that. So not just understanding the laws and things that were passed in previous generations to limit people, which is very important, because just because we don't cast that vote doesn't mean we don't live in the reality of that. but that recognizing that that connects to people and that you have an ability to change that, understanding how laws are made, understanding how your vote is affected, understanding how you affect all the people in your community when you take a stand for things and how you can affect change in those places, and that we are responsible to each other to make change when we see something that's wrong. And by educating people, or by educating our children, we also need to teach them how to sit and ruminate in things that are uncomfortable, that we don't like, that we have to take responsibility for if they're going to change, and not continue to wash over it and say, it's okay, all lives matter. No, Black lives matter because Black lives are in danger. And we can say that without fear or without misconception that somebody is not going to value our life, because our life is already being valued. So we know that we have to stand up for those who need it, and we need to teach our children and to practice ourselves how to sit in those uncomfortable places, how to sit in with that knowledge and say, okay, how do I best respond and seek out truth and change if that's what God's asking me to do, which of course we believe He is. And then how to advocate, how to work together to find ways to help, not take over and come in, and say, here, oh, I'm here now, so I can fix it. It's not really that simple. How do we partner together to make a change so that the same points, the same history doesn't happen again? We have to learn in advocating for each other to listen, to sit and be a listener with our heart. And again, if we can learn how to ruminate in the things we don't like hearing, then listening is a lot easier. We're not listening with a way to respond and to jump in and say, well, but here's how we're going to, and it's not my fault. And, but to teach our kids and ourselves how to do those things. So, education, and then rumination, and then learning how to be an advocate. That's what's on my heart.
Kudos to Charlie for keeping with the time limit I gave her while still managing to share so much of her heart. To know her is to know that that was no small feat. And I appreciate her insistence on teaching her sons to listen with compassion to Black and brown people as we express the overt and covert injustices we've suffered, even when that makes you squirm in your seat, because you can't address pain you won't acknowledge. And Mama, that's where you and I come in. Like I said before, we are our children's first and best teacher. You teach them how to share, how to say please and thank you, and how to treat people. And my question for you today is, how intentional are you with that last one? Do you talk with your child about the reality of privilege versus discrimination purely based on skin color? And do you share your moral view on that? Do you challenge their notions about people who look different to them? And if not, why not? Because if not you, then who will have your child's ear instead? And what will that person, what will they teach him or her? Now, what we shared today wasn't perfect, comprehensive, or politically correct, but I hope it encouraged you to have your own conversations around the table with your children. Any change that arises won't last without your help. And while it's not up to you to change the whole world, you do have a say about what's discussed in your world called home. Many thanks to Kirsten, Akia, and Charlie for joining me on this episode and for their courage in facing the toughest issue mothers face in America today. I mean, talk about real talk about the challenges moms face and the courage needed to meet them. There are plenty of resources on the internet to educate yourself and your family about America's history of oppression from slavery till today. But if you need a reading list to get you started, you can find one in today's show notes at vinelifefaith.com/episode 9. Because what we know for sure is racism is permitted at best and sanctioned at worst. And as the primary teacher and nurturer in your child's life, any silence on the issue makes you complicit. But you're better than that. God says so. So since you have the power to impact generations, how will you? Because remember, When it comes to you being the mother of your children, you are the woman for the job. Take care. Thanks for making this podcast part of your day today. Before you go, please be sure to rate and subscribe to the podcast. That way you get notified about new episodes while helping other moms discover the show. Motherhood Unmasked is sponsored by Vine Life Faith, where we're breaking negative cycles and building healthy community through connection with Christ. VineLifeFaith.com.